BB851, turn right, heading 180. Order 14 Papa, turn right 245, report localizer established 27.
Episode 3 of this mini-series covers the period between the events of JT610 and ET302 and focuses heavily on how Boeing acted during this period. The 5-month period or so shed a lot of light on how Boeing acted, and the committee found that on numerous occasions, Boeing failed to provide crucial information that could have helped prevent the events of ET302. If you haven't tuned in to the previous 2 episodes of this mini-series here on the channel, I would highly encourage you to do so to completely get up to speed of where we are indeed at. Today, though, I begin with the immediate response to the events of JT610, which, to clarify, occurred in October of 2018. It has been found through this committee and thorough investigations over the past 18 months that following the events that occurred with Lion Air Flight JT610, Boeing failed to take the actions that were necessary to prevent a further incident that could have saved the lives of some 157 individuals. Days after the events of JT610, Boeing and the FAA failed to inform pilots and/or airlines as a collective of MCAS by name. According to the same committee, they only issued advisories for the 737 MAX. It was only after airlines and pilots around the world began to inquire about MCAS did the aircraft manufacturer go over MCAS, although this was not made public to us at the time. What's scarier is that the FAA had already learned that Boeing failed to fix one of the AOA sensors on more than 80% of the currently delivered, at the time, 737 MAX aircraft. On top of this, it was also said that the FAA worked out that Boeing decided not to inform customers or even the FAA of this problem until only after the Lion Air aircraft went down. Now, according to the same people, this was more than a 14-month period that the problem existed and nothing was done until it cost people's lives. Ultimately, in this case, Boeing did everything in their power to downplay and take away attention from the MCAS system. This can be even noted after the JT610 incident. In fact, according to the same committee, communications between certain Boeing employees with the FAA and many other regulators noted that the MCAS was simply just an, in quotation marks, new system that was being added to the aircraft type moving forward. This is, again, another perfect example of downplaying the actual implications this could have on pilots and aircraft if one of the AOA sensors faced trouble. Essentially, if Boeing were to go ahead and tell the regulators what MCAS was, there would be more training, more scrutiny, and ultimately this would take longer to certify the jet. As discussed in previous episodes, Boeing was pressured to produce these aircraft at a rapid rate, and therefore could not be waiting forever for this certification to take place on the MCAS. So downplaying a feature like this and noting it as just an addition to, say, speed trim would see the certification process massively sped up, even if it put lives at risk. This doesn't mean, though, that Boeing employees weren't worried. Like we've seen now in countless interviews with ex-employees of the aircraft manufacturer, they did have their concerns, but were not allowed in any sense to be vocal about it, or if they did, they were simply ignored. Furthermore, the MCAS system was noted to not actually have been tested properly during the certification process. Essentially, Boeing failed to evaluate the various effects that could lead to the failure and the nose being pitched down in the initial summaries and testing phases. There's ultimately much more to this because while the said aircraft can indeed have a fault, the effect that it then puts on pilots and stress in this situation is worse. You could argue pilots are used to dealing with stress in flight, but when it comes to an issue they are not familiar with, nor an issue, say, they were trained/altered for, the stakes are risen greatly and they are forced, in this case, as the nose is pitched down at the rate it is, to try and recover the plane. An almost impossible task, but one ultimately pilots should not have to be put through to begin with. Now I've covered the 737 MAX red flags in a bit more detail above, and the overall impact they would have had on the type, I thought I'd go on to what the Transport Aircraft Risk Assessment Methodology, or TARAM, estimated, and this was the following. Without a fix to MCAS during the lifetime of the 737 MAX, so say Boeing never went back and grounded the jet and tried to fix the MCAS and continued it operating at the same rate we'd seen in the past, and in addition as more planes were delivered, they're saying that there could have been a potentially 15 additional incidences involving the type that would have resulted in 3,000 lives lost or close to that amount. This is a catastrophic amount that, while is just an estimate, highlights in my eyes, if this was to continue, the implications we could have seen without a fix, and just how crucial it was to get the plane properly grounded so they could work on it. Despite the estimate that I mentioned from the Transport Aircraft Risk Assessment Methodology, or TARAM, and the overall risk it had, the 737 MAX continued to fly after JT610. The problem being, the reason behind the type not being grounded was because the FAA did not believe it could justify grounding the aircraft or series at that point in time, only after the one incident where it was not completely determined what actually went wrong. It was only justified to ground the type after the second incident, which was strikingly similar to the first one, and this has caused a lot of controversy, as many people believed it simply took more loss of life for the FAA to finally act on the type and have it grounded. The FAA's review of the Boeing 737 MAX, but more specifically MCAS, only began on the 9th of January 2019. And the final version of the said draft was done a month later, essentially on the 8th of February 2019, that same year. However, this report was never actually properly finalised, which is a crucial step for any report and any investigation. In fact, the review of said MCAS report that they were working on was still going through only a review stage with management when ET302 happened. This is because it took the FAA so long to actually focus on the MCAS and situation and begin their investigation that they never probably had it finalised or approved by the management. And then we saw the events of ET302, like I mentioned, which caused a catastrophic loss of life, and again, like I mentioned, was strikingly similar to the events of JT610. Despite all this for Boeing and the FAA, those 5 months are filled with many red flags that have impacted the credibility of the FAA and, in addition, Boeing. From Boeing, say, failing to communicate with airlines, a known problem they had, or only doing so, should I mention, after JT610 had occurred, to other key moments where the FAA's certification process came under heavy scrutiny, as if they were leaving out key parts when certifying and simply ignoring certain aspects of the aircraft because they trusted Boeing or wanted to get the aircraft out sooner rather than later. Again, trying to profit over the safety. It's something we see all around the globe, but when it comes to the aviation industry and specifically aircraft manufacturers, it's a huge risk. There needs to be transparency and the communication needs to be key. In turn, this left many people doubting the actual process moving forward with other aircraft and whether key problems or potential problems are being overlooked in favour of getting an aircraft out as soon as humanly possible to maximise the revenues and better compete with competition. That concludes the third episode, ultimately the third instalment of this 737 MAX report mini-series where I'm covering various areas. We still have a few more episodes to go, and the next episode I think you may be interested in even more. Again, MCAS has featured prominently. This episode was focused more so on the communication tactics and how Boeing were keeping items from the FAA in order to get it certified. The next episode will be solely centered around MCAS and the troubles with it. So, thank you once again for the continued support on this series. I have really enjoyed making it, despite the subject matter, which of course is not incredibly good. But thank you once again. I will see you tomorrow for episode 4. But I'd like to also mention, if you have any thoughts on any of the topics that I've discussed, any of the bullet points I've mentioned, do not hesitate to also drop them in the comments below and create a dialogue with people there. See you next time.